we are having a big reset coming in. So it's a structural reset of
unprecedented global reset coming. Here's what the elites are planning. Simon Michael. 2 weeks ago. Okay, let's have a look. Like and subscribe.
unprecedented size and scope. The people who control the levers of power are trying to decide amongst themselves a changing of guard and what the new system would be. What's coming, I believe, is also a food shortage. The Iran situation has not just cut off oil, it's also cut off everything that's coming out of the Middle East, and about something like half the world's fertilizer needs sulfur. The United States government has been actively supporting and funding directly 120 bioweapon labs around the world.
It has.
Most of which are actually producing things that are actually against the Geneva Convention.
Who do you think the people in the shadows are who are actually making the big decisions?
A relatively small number of people have controlled the money side of the world for a long time. I believe the people we are talking about here, you would call them...
Simon Michaud, it is great to have you on Commodity Culture. There is so much going on in the world today that is pointing to some kind of major reset or change in the way that humanity operates, whether this is a forced reset through a collapse or one imposed on us by policymakers or those pulling the levers of power behind the scenes. Let's start with a high-level overview of what you're seeing right now. What brought us here, and what do you think comes next?
So to answer your question, what I see happening here is a little bit from each column, right? We are having a big reset coming in. So it's a structural reset of unprecedented size and scope. A lot of what we're dealing with at the moment is synthetic, like it's been organized, and I believe the timing of that is a consequence of we're seeing a changing of guard at the top of the food chain of who controls our industrial value chain and the business behind it, right? And it's like a Game of Thrones sort of like environment, is the way I sort of see it. And they're all sort of, jockeying with each other, and, they've moved on from harsh language to actual kinetic war now. To decide, and the commodities are being used as a lever. So what I'm seeing is a combination of things. In 2008, the global financial crisis underscored the fundamental structural weakness of our financial system. Right?
True.
And in many respects, the system died at that point, and it's been on life support ever since, like a zombie system.
Also true.
What underpins that system and makes it viable is its attachment to energy, oil in particular. Now, it's all been fine while oil was cheap and we had lots of it, but now oil's become expensive and now it's got strings attached. What's happening, I believe, is in 2008, the financial system was shown to be invalid. And the Basel III Banking Accord, which was ratified only a couple of years ago, since 2023, but it was implemented in 2025, basically said you're not allowed to use any paper assets anymore. So there's a fundamental restructure in the background. I see the world in layers and in systems, and my basic worldview is the world is run by a criminal oligarch mafia that has one set of rules and agreements for themselves and another set for everyone else. And there we're seeing the equivalent of a civil war within that group to resolve structural issues. Now, back to banking. The banking...
I view it as there's one core cabal. It's at the U.S. Treasury, at the Exchange Stabilization Fund that runs the CIA's black budget. Basically, think of it as the dark side of the CIA. That's the core group. And all these other groups are offshoots of it, like Zionism in Israel and the globalists in Europe. And other offshoots are like the neocons in Congress.
System was a certain way, the fiat currency, they could print money, could do whatever they want. Now they can't do that.
Yeah, you can think of it one operating arm. It's just the core group is running a Ponzi scheme, and they're absolutely desperate. And okay, another group of is U.S. regulators, and how they've completely gutted the U.S. financial system, its health, in order to just prop it up a little bit longer. They've created zombie banks, banks that are really are underwater but pretend not to be. So you have U.S. regulators and all that's what I blogged about a hell of a lot 15 years ago, is all the steps they were doing to undermine the banking system. And that's one group of bad actors there that don't get talked about that much, but they're also part of the whole big rotten conspiracy that runs everything.
That. Right. And so, okay, so the banking system has to refit itself. And is it going to go to crypto? Is it going to go to some sort of physical asset backing or what? The banking system of the Anglo petrodollar system.
But the media control of media, that is tied to the core one, primarily to the Treasury, the deep state, and yeah, that's the one who actually gives the media its marching orders. Others have influence over it, like the Zionists, but one who truly controls the media, let's just call it the U.S. Treasury, controls the media.
The US dollar, petrodollar, that's administered globally out of London is in trouble.
Yeah.
And it's about to be replaced by something else. And what we're seeing is one big giant arm wrestle between two basic factions.
But I think a lot of the arms, like, for example, the Zionist arm, don't understand that they're involved in the Ponzi scheme. It's just like when Madoff, during financial crisis, a very wealthy fund manager, and everyone thought he was this genius who had otherworldly returns on the money he was managing, but really was just doing a Ponzi scheme. And a lot of people lost a lot of money. But the key point I wanted to make was his auditor, Madoff's auditor, also had all his money invested in Madoff. Now, why would you invest all your money in a Ponzi scheme? Well, he didn't know it was a Ponzi scheme. He just knew it was fraud. So, yes, the Zionists know that they're cooperating with this corrupt other cabal at the U.S. Treasury. They don't understand that corrupt cabal at U.S. Treasury is running a Ponzi scheme, and they're tying the future of Israel to something that's doomed to collapse, and it's not going to end up well for them. Not going to end up well for the globalists in Europe either. But they're like Bernie Madoff's auditor. They're involved in the fraud. They know it's fraud. They just don't understand the nature of the global fraud they're involved in. It's something that has a expiration date.
About whether that system is allowed to survive and reset into something else, or does a new financial system come in, which I believe is the commodities alliance we call BRICS, and they're trying to bring to the table their own commodities-backed currency. Thus,
They are.
punch-up we're seeing in Ukraine and the punch-up we're seeing in Iran. And in Iran...
Exactly. That the BRICS. This is a fight against BRICS by the West. By the Treasury. It's a challenge to the dominance of the dollar. And no surprise that the U.S. Treasury is going to be fighting that.
I believe the two factions that are arm wrestling over who gets what and who does what is between groups like BlackRock and Vanguard, like the big hedge funds, and the Chinese government. Right, so that's kind of who is doing the arm wrestling. Commodities are used as a trading card. So the rest of us plebs, the punters on the planet who just want to buy stuff and get on with things, they don't want to. They don't. None of this is necessary. If we had an honest conversation about what's been happening 50 years ago, we would have come to the conclusion that we would need to change sometime in the future, and we could organize towards that change. And
that's just the thing. A lot of people don't get. People like him is there is no way to change. If you know Bernie Madoff is running a Ponzi scheme, there's no way to fix the Ponzi scheme. There's no way to make the investors, all these people that think they have money in Madoff when there's nothing there. There's no way to prevent those people from losing money. It's too late. It's a Ponzi scheme. And that's what's going on with the dollar. 95% of the physical dollars that have been printed, more than that, maybe not even like 98, 99% are overseas. Are in places like Iraq, Nicaragua, Somalia, functioning as currency there. When all those dollars come back to the United States, it's basically going to cause a currency collapse. That means the future of dollar depends on U.S. hegemony, continuing to keep a large part of the world dollarized. If that fails, if dollars start returning to the United States, the dollar collapses, the treasury market collapses, and the financial system collapses. And there is no way to solve that, to transition away from the dollar as a reserve currency without leading to a dollar collapse. It's just like, that's why I call it a Ponzi scheme.
we could have done it without bloodshed.
You can't solve a Ponzi scheme, even if you find out about it. It's already too late.
But that's not how the world works. Instead, we're going to have arguments instead, and try and do each other over and exploit the situation and what have you. So, at a high level, we're seeing a fundamental shift that involves money. Our primary energy system, which is oil, gas, and coal, underpin everything. Coal's pretty much, stay.
And I just meant one aspect of the Ponzi scheme is all those dollars abroad. Another one is like the yen carry trade, where some estimates between $2 and $4 trillion have been borrowed from Japan and put in US dollar. And once Japan gets in trouble, once that unwinds, if you sell $2 to $4 trillion of US assets and buy Japanese yen, that also crashes the dollar and the stock market and the treasury market. So it's not just one. You have all these dollars circulating abroad. When they come back, creates inflation. You have the yen carry trade. Then if you look at the banking sector of the United States, all these banks are pretending to be solvent when they're not. So that's like a third Ponzi scheme type thing, that third problem, that any type of financial crisis will risk massive bank failures. And there's no way to fix that. If a bank doesn't have enough assets, you can't just, if you print money to replace what's missing, that causes inflation. There's no solution to all of these problems underlying the dollar. And I could go into more of them. And that's why the only question is when and how fast will the dollar go down? My estimate is we will spiral into inflation over the next 5 years, and then we'll just skyrocket into hyperinflation after that.
Even though it's politically incorrect to use, gas and oil have become geopolitically very sensitive because they're being used as levers, right? And so our energy system, which we are still hopelessly dependent on, we cannot easily just shelve it and go and do something else. So, okay, what's coming, I believe, is also a food shortage. Now, that's
absolutely the lack of fertilizer, the very expensive diesel. All those are going to hurt farmers, except there's a year lag time before, when you know there's going to be problems in the food market, which we knew as soon as the Strait of Hormuz closed, and for food prices to start skyrocketing. So around the New Year's is when serious problems in the grains in the food markets will emerge.
If you actually sort of did an analysis a couple of months ago about how many times has the global food network taken a structural hit, and the answer was a lot. And a lot of them, like if you were an actuary trying to work out the probability of all this, it looked bizarre. And to me, it didn't look natural. Like someone's playing silly buggers. Now, the Iran situation has not just cut off oil, it's also cut off everything that's coming out of the Middle East in that sector. And about something like half the world's fertilizer needs sulfur. That's not coming out of the Middle East anymore. We've missed at least one season for planting, which means we've now got a wheat crop that's, the last time it was this small was 1970, right? But the world's grown in proportion quite a lot since then. So we've now got food shortage on
millions will starve. And as someone else mentioned, that's going to create another migrant crisis in Europe. So Europe is not happy about the current migration. Just wait till hundreds of thousands of more starts pouring in because of famine in Africa.
Cards. It's just a question: how do we manage that? Right. So at a high level, we've got macro change happening. The people who control the levers of power are trying to decide amongst themselves a changing of guard and what the new system would be. I believe within the wreckage of that, we will see on the other side of this transition a fundamentally new kind of system that will operate to very different rules.
The sponsor of today's episode is ARC Silver Gold Osmium. Owner Ian Everard is praised even by his...
I disagree. You want to know what the changing of new guard? They might be trying to do that, but the new guard is going to be the AfD in Germany. It's going to be Le Pen in France, and it's going to be restore in the UK, Rupert Lowe. That's the new guard that's coming in, despite what the globalists want.
Or one is really making, for most, is just uncovered. But first, I want to find out who you believe is really making the decisions in the realm of politics and geopolitics. Because I think, for most people watching the show, maybe you realize it already. It's probably not the prime ministers and presidents and other politicians who are standing at the podium. Is that accurate in your view? And if so, who do you think the people in the shadows are?
It's fracturing. For example, the globalists and the Zionists. The globalists are all committed to the war in Ukraine. The Iran war, huge distraction. It completely undermines the Ukraine project. It basically kills the Ukraine project. It sucks away all U.S. weapons to deal with Iran. The reason why today Ukraine has no air defenses because all of the interceptors that have been used in the Gulf against Iran. So it's fractured nowadays. You have different groups that used to be more tightly controlled, let's say, from the deep state in Washington, but the deep state in Washington is losing control. That's why you had this Iran war happen at a time when the deep state in Washington didn't want it to.
Who are actually making the big decisions?
So I've met quite a few politicians and I've talked to them, and on one hand it was quite demoralizing in that they were just very ordinary people. Like there weren't anything spectacularly unusual about them. What I found though was every politician I contacted, connected with and talked to and advised for one reason or another, excuse me, they were all captured by a system that had a lot of momentum behind it. That is, they had a job to do, and within that window of operation, they had a very narrow mandate to move things around. If they changed anything big or structural, the system around them would arrange their replacement very quickly.
Exactly. And that's how the media works too. There are things you can, a reporter is part of a system, and their ability to cover stories is limited, and if they try to cover something they shouldn't cover, well, they get replaced. Look at the guy who made that report on Pizzagate at the time of Podesta emails leaking. He made a report on something he shouldn't, and he was kicked out of the industry. The same way with mainstream journalism. That's how the narrative is to control of mainstream journalism. You stick within what's okay to cover, and if you go outside of that, you get kicked out of the industry.
And they knew that, and their real job was to get re-elected. And there's a cynicism to them as well. Oh, we're not going to change this. And the structures that need to be changed, or in fact are changed.
Yeah, thankfully, that guy went to RT. He still has a job. Of course, as soon as you go to RT, they call you like a Russian plant, and they try to discredit you that way.
At the moment are so fundamental, they are out of reach of almost everyone. So politicians, are they in charge? No. They're not even leaders. Politicians won't lead. What they will do is they'll look at the environment around them and try and navigate a path through the challenges they see, but they'll only pick a path they think will work. And that will happen when someone else has done the job to show the path.
But you have exceptions to this rule. People like Rupert Lowe or Donald Trump, the original Donald Trump in 2016, who completely reshaped the Republican parties in many important ways, like against outsourcing, for example, against the trade deals that were terribly not in U.S. favor. That was one part of the outsourcing. How the outsourcing was done is these terrible trade deals that allowed companies to come in without any barriers and drive manufacturing in the United States out of business. And Trump put a stop to that when he was first elected.
So they're not our thought leaders and they're not our leaders. That's what our democracy has become. And a lot of them really are intellectual midgets compared to, say, the mental capacity of the people who negotiated what the hell to do with World War II or the founding of the United States. We don't have that caliber.
It's not an accident. People with vision, intelligence, they're a threat to the system. And media finds some scandal, discredits them before they ever get elected. It's not an accident that our Congress is filled with idiots.
Of intellect at the helm at that moment. So who's calling the shots? The real power brokers of our world. Who controls the money? Where does the money come from? Who owns oil? Who owns mining? It's the banking sector. Who owns the banking sector? They own each other. And when you go down the rabbit hole in that, before tax havens came into effect, you could tell who owned stuff. The answer is they owned each other, and a relatively small number of people owned everything else at the top. Right, and they were able to actually exert influence, not in a direct way like telling people directly what to do, but by turning the oxygen off certain sectors and encouraging people to go to other sectors. And then the need to make money and source money controlled everything else. I believe the people we are talking about here, you would call them, you often hear the Davos man. You know, the group that actually sort of, we've been seeing for years people get...
Those are who I refer to as the globalists.
Together at the Bilderberg group level. And the agendas that actually come out of those meetings happen to resemble very much what happens geopolitically later. It is my opinion, after trying to chase what's happening here, like when you talk to politicians and stuff, they have no clue, no concept, no view, no perception of what goes on at these meetings at the Bilderberg level. They're just not part of that. They're not part of that system at all.
A genius with poor orating skills will sound like an imbecile. Are you talking about me here? No, I'm kidding. I'm trying to get better.
But the people who would attend the Bilderberg meetings, they are the visible part of the network. The real people who pull the strings are not visible. So I would say Bilderberg is sort of like middle management. And what's telling them what to do, you can only speculate. But it's that level. Who controls the money?
Speculate. I know exactly who it is. It's centered at U.S. Treasury, the Exchange Stabilization Fund, in charge of protecting the dollar. That's where all the rot comes from.
Controls the corporations who control the stuff. Like in America, I believe we're down to 4 large companies control the entire media empire. Who owns those companies? The answer is each other. They've got shares in each other. So it's really one big conglomerate, and they sort of agree what to do at a strategic direction level. And I think we're approaching a point where the business model behind our whole society is being flushed out in the open. I think there's a macro scale plan in.
The media has control over the narrative. Global narrative is collapsing because people like Asmongold, Elon Musk, and FreeX, and all the other content creators that are bypassing the media, which is incredibly good. And it's another sign that we're reaching the end times for the dollar, is the collapse of the U.S. global propaganda machine.
Forward transformation that's coming, and we, the people, probably would not allow it unless we've been sort of maneuvered into this position to accept I believe we're about to be collectively put in an untenable situation.
I think we're heading where we're heading. Look at what happened in Germany after the Weimar Republic's currency collapse, hyperinflation there, because that is probably the best bet. Don't look at someplace like Africa, what it's like in a hyperinflation there. That's not a good judge. Look at a Western nation, Germany, experienced hyperinflation. How did that end up? What happened afterwards? Hitler happened afterwards. World War II happened afterwards. Currency collapse is extremely radicalizing. And one reason for what Hitler did to the Jews is him blaming the currency collapse on the Jews. And so whoever is tarred, or whoever is associated with leading to the downfall of the dollar, and by extension the euro and other paper currencies will go down with the dollar and the yen, there'll be a ton of anger directed at everyone who played a role in that. And there's probably going to be violence. Hopefully it'll just end with a lot of people in jail, though. But considering Hitler was a result last time, we're going to have very radical people also. I think Asmongold, except even more radical, coming to power.
With multiple problems, very stressful, that are deadly serious, with consequences for us, which means we'll be very susceptible to suggestion. And we'll be presented with a way forward that we will accept, that in normal circumstances, when we've got time to think about it, we would not entertain for a moment.
It won't work. They tried that during COVID. It was their best chance, this global pandemic. They tried to do lockdowns, whatever. COVID, not only did it fail, they didn't manage to do vaccine IDs and vaccine passports. They failed to keep the lockdown going, and it basically broke down. And since after COVID, there'll be an even bigger pushback against any other similar type of endeavor. So now I'd say it's impossible to do like any type of great reset. They might try. They tried during COVID. They try again, that there's no doubt. But it'll fail. They are in a weaker position now than they were during COVID. During COVID, trust in media was so much higher. And that has just taken such a tanking since then that their ability to do a great reset is just lower today. The X is free. During the COVID pandemic, X wasn't free. It was censored. They try to do anything now, free X will be a huge thorn in their side, as just one example.
And that's what I believe is coming. And we're seeing, for example, quietly in the background, money systems are being evolved into something else. We've got the police surveillance state manifesting in place. While they're sort of just claiming, oh, it's not possible, they're doing it openly now. A lot of the wars that we are sort of seeing around the world now don't make sense.
The problem with, yes, they're doing more of the police surveillance state, but the entire population is turning against deep state, including members of the police. So, yes, maybe the police has more power to monitor, but the police is becoming less under deep state control at the same time. So, their ability to do some great change, some great reset, I'd say it's not possible.
There's information that's come out now about the Ukraine war that puts things in a whole new context. They go, oh dear, right. And so why was this allowed in the first place? The Iran war was the same. Like, if you were to say this out loud to someone to explain from the beginning, it would sound irrational, which tells me what we are told are the cliff notes in a PR.
That's why. So people looking at the Iran war and trying to figure out some great reason some conspiracy reason behind it. To me, it's a system breaking down. The deep state, the globalists, are wedded to this Ukraine project, and the Iran project cuts that out at the knees. So why would they ever do that? Because you have different arms of the deep state doing different things, not in coordination anymore. You have Netanyahu pushing Trump towards this war, and that was just one rogue element of the deep state doing something that undermines the huge, big, multi-year project that is Ukraine. It's a system breaking down. It's not... Yes, there'll be other parts of it, like the energy and oil, that might try to profit from it, but don't try to read too many great plans into it, because this is a system breaking down. Just look at how unhappy all the globalists in Europe are about the Iran war.
Context. Yeah, and so that's layers, systems, greed, human nature, monkey business. Some things never change. But we are in the cusp of changing. Our industrial era is about to evolve to an entirely new era, and according to fundamental limits that are different to what happens now.
I want to go a little bit deeper down this rabbit hole, and you can stop me if maybe this is getting too conspiratorial. But have you looked into secret societies such as the Freemasons and other similar organizations and their potential role in this sort of transnational criminal oligarchy that is calling the shots? Is there any role of secret societies as far as you've seen in all of this?
So for entertainment 20 years ago, I did look at all that sort of stuff. And my conclusion is human nature is what it is. Now, a relatively small number of people have controlled the money side of the world for a long time. And what I did was a thought experiment of, well, if I was one of these guys, how would I go about this? And so starting up a secret society and everything is great, but you're never going to be able to control it. What you could do is set up a small group that would then infiltrate one of these groups. Let's say the Freemasons. They'll set up shop, right, we're all Freemasons. And they'll set up, as I say, one of their groups, one of their lodges or something. And then out of that lodge, they'll do what they want to do. All the nefarious monkey business, much like what the Bilderberg Group does now, or the Council on Foreign Relations does now, or the Trilateral Commission does now, right? But they would actually sort of organize themselves in a group like the Freemasons as a way of organizing themselves across a wide geographical area. There'll come a point when the people around them realize what they're doing, and they've outlived their usefulness in terms of carrying capacity. That group will quietly withdraw and go and join another group and relabel. And so through history, a small group of very wealthy individuals who happen to control a lot. And when they say control, what we now call entrepreneur.
I'd say the dark side of CA, the Exchange Stabilization Fund, that, yes, I think that they've infiltrated a lot of groups like the Zionists in Israel, and they've used them for their purpose. Because when their interests are aligned, like dollarizing a huge part of the Middle East was in the interest of the Treasury. Because it keeps a whole bunch of dollars, moves a whole bunch of dollars out of the United States, lowering inflation, and spreads it across the Middle East. Starting a war with Iran that is going to destroy U.S. influence in the Middle East is not in the U.S. Treasury's interest. So it might be in Israel's interest to have a weakened Iran, weakened Middle East, but not at the cost of from the U.S. side, U.S. deep state. It's bad. U.S. is being forced out of the region, which is likely to lead to de-dollarization. It's, you think of the Zionists as one group, and now they're sort of divorcing themselves from deep state. Their interests are now very different.
Entrepreneurship. For an example, the Battle of Waterloo. Napoleon was defeated. The eminent banker at the time in the British Isles was Rothschild, and he had an agent on the edge of
Another example of this, that is how I think about it, is during Iran-Contra. What the deep state treasury was trying to do is inflation was out of control in double digits, and they need to get that under control. That's when they really started the process of dollarization, moving dollars outside the United States and flooding different parts of the world with dollar. There are multiple components of that. One was the huge flow of drugs into the United States. Iran-Contra, cocaine smuggling from the Contras in Nicaragua. Planes would fly in to the United States with cocaine, and they'd fly out with dollars. That's how they moved it to Nicaragua. One part of all that dollarization, a key part of that, was destabilizing governments around the world and destroying their currencies. Now, the people at the CIA doing this, working with the Contras, they didn't know that that was their purpose. They were told that they were fighting communism. So that's an example of CIA that was involved in Iran-Contra. They didn't understand they were a tool to distribute physical dollars around the world. They thought they were actually fighting communism. That was their narrative they went with. I believe Zionists is the same way in Israel. The way they're going out to war, destabilizing places like Syria, they're doing it for their own interests, for the greater Israel. And the United States is supporting that because in order to dollarize the region. That's why the deep state keeps on supporting Israel, is for that purpose. This Iran war is, I think, one of the first times where deep state and Israel's interests have really diverged. Is if they won the war against Iran, it'd be a different story. But starting a war against Iran that you lose, that the United States loses, is terrible for the dollar and for the U.S. hegemony over the region. And that was caused by Netanyahu and the Zionists. It was, the Zionists have become a problem for the deep state. It's more just they're losing control of everything. The narrative, media's control is lessening. You have people, outsiders like Trump getting elected to U.S. U.S. president. People like Trump being elected to U.S. president. The whole system is coming apart slowly. And when this system finally does come apart and all the consequences, like the inflation from all those dollars coming back to the United States, the media arm is going to further weaken, and people will learn the truth at the same time as their currency collapse. And boy, are they not going to be happy.
Battlefield to see who won. He got information ahead of everyone else, which is what every company in the world tries to do now. And he used that information to his own benefit. Ethics be damned. But what did he do? He released rumors that weren't true. Everyone panicked. Everyone sold all the stocks. Right, and he released rumors and he sold his own stocks, and then people go, oh, and he set off a trigger, a panic. And then at the last minute before the real news came in, he then bought up all those stocks at cents on the pound. And the following day, the British announced that they won. Napoleon's been defeated, and the Rothschild banking empire was the richest in United Kingdom, or the British Isles. Sorry. Okay, so that's a conspiracy theory, but look at it from a different direction. If that happened now, we would call them an entrepreneur. It's how we look at Bill Gates or Elon Musk. Were they that different? Probably not. So a lot of these things is these actions have always happened in the.
Elon Musk, he didn't get his fortune through banking. He got his fortune through, like, making cars and making spaceships, making a satellite system that gives internet to people around the world, which is real products that can be sold and are valuable. So I wouldn't, put him in the same category as a banker. That, just saying.
Background, money has always been money, and people with money will always do what people with money do. Right. And so I believe such people would organize themselves for their own gain, and they will weaponize everything they can lay their hands on for self gain.
Well, there's nothing wrong with owning an emerald mine. It's an asset. If they're using child labor, it'd be a different story. But an emerald mine in and of itself, they're perfectly above the board emerald mines.
And the best way to do that, small group of people, and have them move in and out of institutions in society, while the rest of society is still operating with the last decade or two social contract. They have no idea what's happening. They don't care, and they'll just move on. So did secret societies play a role in this? Probably, but was it actually them? And
It was one specific secret society, if you want to call it that. It's the Spooks, the original Spooks at the Exchange Stabilization Fund that started funding covert operations before World War II, and then continued afterwards. They're the ones who ultimately wrecked the dollar by flooding the rest of the world with dollars that were backed by our gold. And we flooded the rest of the world with more dollars than we had gold, so there was a problem. And since people realized that, they started trading in their dollars for gold, and that began the spiral of the Spooks who, oh my God, if we let the dollar collapse, people ask why, and then we'll find out all the heinous shit we've been doing. Like, for example, MK Ultra that United States did, part of that was experiments in mind control, but it's also experiments in torture. One example, there was a house in Germany where the Germans knew this was happening. They would grab people that wouldn't be missed, be taken to that house, and basically they were tortured to death. That is one part of what MK Ultra did. Now, if U.S. people find out that the dollar is crashing in value, and it's because some geniuses at the Exchange Stabilization Fund thought it'd be a good idea to finance the torture of select German citizens, that wouldn't fly very well, don't you think? I think some people might be going to jail for a very long time. And the reason why, that's what started the whole conspiracy. It's desperate, all people involved at the U.S. Treasury, at the Exchange Stabilization Fund, their desperation to never be held to account to what they did. And stuff like putting a bullet in JFK's head was all their efforts to avoid accountability and everything they did after that.
Sort of like a middle path, like a parallel path to all the conventional conspiracy theory stuff.
That makes a lot of sense.
Humans
Yeah.
suck.
Yeah. I think we can probably agree to that. Now, you mentioned, and I'm kind of going off script here because I'm very fascinated by some things you've said, so I want to dive deeper into that. You mentioned that there'll be some sort of event or series of events that could be coming up where people feel desperate and they're forced into certain actions they wouldn't consider otherwise. Obviously, we already saw that play out with the pandemic. So I think the people who are pulling levers of power have seen that as evidence of, hey, if we scare people enough, they really will jump through the hoops we want them to jump through. Now, there's two false flag events.
But that ultimately failed. You didn't get the vaccines IDs out of that. And now the position to do that, faith in media is far less. There'd be far more opposition to doing anything like COVID again. I don't think you could do lockdowns again. Even if there was a new pandemic, people would resist a lockdown this time. It wouldn't work.
That people are talking about. One is a fake alien invasion. You know, you had Spielberg with Disclosure Day. A lot of people were saying this
No one would believe that. That's just silly.
is kind of to put the idea in our heads. Apparently, it was a terrible movie, so I don't think that really worked out. And you know, back in the day, you had
You know, at the time that Independence Day was released, the mainstream media's hold on the public was so complete that maybe there were some people actually thinking about a scenario like pretending that aliens were invading. Because if you can have total control of the media, then maybe you could get away with it. Nowadays, impossible. Absolutely impossible. The day with social, where everyone has a phone and can record videos, you can't fake an alien invasion.
the War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells over the radio, where they literally pulled a fake alien invasion and had people convinced it was happening. And then the other is a rogue AI. This particular AI's gone rogue. It started to do things. We can't get control of it. In fact, a news story dropped recently featuring OpenAI, and some AI agent that they had apparently went above and beyond what it was supposed to do. And I have a bit of a
That one's, I'd say, more possible. Yeah, when the financial system collapsed, they all tried to blame it all on a rogue AI. They'll try. It'll fail. but they might try.
Feeling in the back of my mind, perhaps
Another narrative they're pushing is Russian hacking or Chinese hacking. They're going to need some type of narrative for when the dollar and financial system starts collapsing, and they'll try to spin some narrative, but it won't work. I think by that time, the faith in mainstream media will have fallen even further. More of the truth will have gone out. People already know about Pizzagate and are learning about like Minnesota fraud and so many other things. By that time, I think it'll be impossible, whatever they try.
that's another story that could be false, but they're dropping to kind of say, hey, we don't exactly have control over AI. Maybe it could do something crazy. What are your thoughts on those two false flags? Are those two obvious, or do you think they're a possibility?
I think all options are on the books, and all things will be tried based on how.
By the way, before COVID hit, there were people like shows like this talking about they're going to do a plague, a virus, shut down the world. There were people warning about everything that happened during COVID before it happening, that this was a plan. Of course, there is a broken clock. Broken clock is right twice a day. And so you can maybe dismiss it as that, but they did simulated viral outbreaks planning, like a few years before COVID. And they did studies on what would happen during a viral contagion and that type of thing. A lot of planning for COVID.
Circumstances change on the day, right? With the changes that are coming huge, it's my opinion that the people in control of our society, both officially and unofficially, don't have a solution that is palatable to deal with some of these challenges. So what they will do is they'll roll out a series of distractions, and it says, the economy's crashing, we're bankrupt, we've been a corrupt nation for the last 40 years, sorry. Oh, by the way, aliens.
Yeah, that's what they'll try to do. It won't work.
So that to me is one way to do it. Another one is like, for example, the COVID pandemic, when they rolled that out, I believe that miscarried as a plan, because there were a number of signatures on the ground that they did.
Yes, exactly. That my point exactly. The lockdown was never supposed to end. They were supposed to transition to vaccine IDs and total control by the government in every aspect of your life. That was the plan. It was the Great Reset. It was supposed to happen as a result of COVID. There was no Great Reset. Everything went back to normal after COVID. COVID failed on that side. Rigging the U.S. presidential election in 2020 succeeded there with universal mail-in ballots, 5 million extra Democratic ballots on Biden's side. Yep, it succeeded there, but on the Great Reset side, it failed.
Didn't go far enough, and they didn't achieve the goals they needed to achieve after risking what they risked. And society is still at large sort of putting this together. Ooh, what was that all about? Right, so that's still coming. AI is an interesting one. To me, no one has made the business case to me that explains how AI is economically viable and will actually help society. On the surface, it looks right, the promises are right, but it's not going to last very long where it's accessible to everyone, and it's really only going to benefit a small number of people. So it's not like a technological development, for example, of, say, the internal combustion engine or electricity, because in the end, it will be only available for the very rich. Because they want to put up all these data centers, and the data set, we just can't do it. There's not the resources to do it, or at least not in the way they're promising. Right, here's a wrinkle. The war in Iran has destroyed the flow rate. The oil's still in the ground, but what's being destroyed is the economics around oil and everything attached to it, everything. One of the casualties of that, and this is very interesting, is the plans to roll out data centers. One by one, data centers and AI development, it's all struggling as a direct consequence of what's being wrecked by the war in Iran.
Yes, it's skyrocketing energy cost. It's not good if you're trying to run data centers.
Right. Ooh, okay. Like another distraction. What could
and also the demand for chips for these data centers. Well, helium from the Persian Gulf is being cut off, and helium is a very important component in the manufacturing of computer chips. And so, at a time where the prices of those are surging already, it's not good for data centers.
What we're seeing in America at the moment is they're now rolling out information from the White House that the 2020 presidential election was not, it was involved with fraud.
I think just separate from what's in this video, that observation I had is a lot of people have started relying heavily on AI for many aspects of their lives. And I think they're going to be in for a rude shock in that AI is going to continue being available. It might even get better than it is now, but it's going to get expensive. That's the future of AI. That is, right now, because of all the investment being poured into AI, it's being given out for free. Like you do a Google search and they give you AI answers for free. I think you might have that might stop the AI answers on your Google search, just because the cost benefit, it just doesn't work for Google. You can't. AI is being given out to free to too many people. It doesn't work like that. So all these people that have become used to just asking AI's questions are going to find that now you have to $1 for every question. What? $1 for every question? No, I'm kidding. It probably won't be that much, but 10 cents for every question? Yeah, that I see. 10. And people that ask like 100 questions a day, that starts to add up. And you got people like, now suddenly a lot of their money is going to go to AI questions, and it's going to, a lot of people will have to stop using AI because of the cost. That's what's coming in terms of AI. Like, just think 10 cents for a question. That's probably, I think, a good indication where we end up.
Fraud and interference from a foreign agent, blah, 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 blah. What if they were to use that as a pretext to delay the midterm elections, do a state of emergency, and then roll out some of these things? Ouch. There are many options on the table. I'm very cynical in terms of what I see and what people will actually, what systems will do about it. People are waking up at a phenomenal rate. They're getting wise to what's happening and how much of their world was based on illusion, lies, and deceit. And
COVID helped enormously for that, and it's accelerating. Like Pizzagate coming out, and someone like Asmongold covering Pizzagate. I never would have expected that. That's incredible.
And they're still in the bewilderment stage. Once they understand, there's going to be a mass awakening. And once we get past that mass awakening, then there's what I call the mass ascension, where, all right, we're going to fix this now. We aren't going to put up with this anymore.
Yeah, that's the one part that's sad. It's Bernie Madoff situation. Yeah, let's say the entire world figured out, oh, Bernie Madoff is running a Ponzi scheme. Let's fix that. You can't fix a Ponzi scheme. America's wealth has already been squandered. Our manufacturing sector has already been outsourced to China. There's no way to magically fix and bring back the manufacturing sector. There's no way to suddenly make our banks solvent. What you can do is you can hold all the people who did this to the United States, who gutted the United States and gutted prosperity of the United States, hold them to accounts. Put them in jail, for example, and fix it so it never happens again. Start moving the right direction. You can do that. But, Social Security, if you're living off that when the dollar collapses, bad news about that. You're not going to be getting as much, if anything. It's going to be very bad. But it's going to be like the collapse of the Soviet Union. It's going to be very bad like that, but Russia today is doing well. So it's only going to be for a period. It's a very bad period as dollar collapses, then it'll get better. And at least a lot of people that deserve to be held to account will be held to account. So that's the positive side.
Before we get to that point, the people who control our society at the moment have to head things off and implement their own plan. And that's kind of what I think we're seeing. So actions like false flags, they've done it too many times to be effective anymore, so they have to have increasingly large false flags to get the control they need. Like I used to think that the war in Iran was a kind of false flag. It's a real war. People are being killed, so it's not false as such. But
it's not a false flag. It's just another sign of the system, the global U.S. hegemony breaking down. Because Trump, they don't control Trump. He's an outsider. The Zionists, though, that fraction, that wing of the deep state, did manage to get their foot into the door with Donald Trump. That combined with Donald Trump just not being terribly informed and distrusting the rest of the deep state, like bureaucracy, that will would be warning him against the war against Iran. He distrusts them. And you have Netanyahu, who has huge influence because of all the money poured into his campaign. And you have the success in Venezuela. Netanyahu gives false intel, and poof, paf. You have a dead supreme leader in Iran and Trump trapped in a war that's going to end his presidency.
It's used as a way of a distraction while something else happens in the background. I don't think that so much anymore because it's taking too long, and if that is the case, whatever it is they're planning, it hasn't been implemented fast enough. But
No, you know that there was no grand plan for the war in Iran by the fact of how much it undermines the war in Ukraine, which clearly globalists and deep state have been going in all in on. And then suddenly you have the war in Iran that completely sidetracks everything in Ukraine. And it real cost, the fact that there's no air defenses this year, right now, in Ukraine, is directly responsible, is a direct result of the war in Iran.
it's that kind of world. This is kind of where we're going.
Well, let's talk about the conflicts, the war in Iran and the Russia-Ukraine conflict that is ongoing. We've seen Russian negotiators meet with the U.S. Supposedly they're in talks to find a way to wind this thing down. But overall, we're seeing the ramp up of this militarization of the West, my home country of Canada, the EU. They're talking about arming themselves against the great Russian threat.
They're talking, but they can't do anything. They've, like Germany spent billions to rearm itself and it has nothing to show for it. Because all these places have outsourced their manufacturing. I mean, places like Russia and China have a manufacturing sector. They can actually produce military material. Right now, Russia alone is out producing the entire NATO alliance in terms of artillery cells. Because we just can't manufacture shit anymore. So, yeah. West is talking about rearming, but they're not doing it. Because they essentially can't.
There's talk about conscription happening potentially at some point in the future. Maybe not a lot of people know this, but I'm in Serbia, right next door to Croatia.
Oh, yeah. There are people in the globalist elites that are talking about conscription. It won't work. The people that, the nationalists, the people, the right that normally would join the military and be nationalistic and fight for, like, say, France, they see their country being overrun by migrants. The people they want to fight are in France. Why the hell would they go off to die against Russia when the threat they are scared of, the threat that's the people that are threatening their women and children are in France? They're not going to do it. They're not going to go along with the conscription to go fight Russia. The threat they want to fight is in Europe.
They recently reintroduced mandatory military conscription. That's an EU country. Germany appears like it could be heading in that direction, potentially the UK as well. What are your thoughts on why this is happening and the real reasons behind the wars in Iran and Russia, Ukraine?
I'm in Finland, Helsinki, and the anti-Russian sentiment here is amazing. Everyone around me, for example, is reliving their worst nightmare, which was the Soviet invasion of 1939, where
the entire U.S. propaganda machine has been, for decades now, ever since Putin came to power, has been vilifying Russia. So, of course, there's this absolute hatred of Russia across the West. It's even people like Asmongold. So many people are captured by it. It's sad.
The Soviets back then were truly stupid. They were incompetent and they were stupid. The Russians they face today are a very different animal.
Oh, yeah. Russia today and the Soviets? No, Soviets were like paper tiger compared to Russia today. Russia today, they have a hardened veteran military force from the war in Ukraine. They have some of the most advanced systems in the world. They're probably ahead of the United States in a lot of areas, like hypersonic missiles. Yeah, no, it would not end well. Let me put it to you. If you take U.S. out of the equation, all the rest of Europe against Russia, Europe gets crushed.
The people around me have all been convinced to engage in the anti-Russian hysteria in a way where it's cooked their ability to reason. Europe at large is being pushed into a conflict.
Europe is already being invaded at this very moment. Spain is one example of it. It's being overrun by foreigners with completely different values that are committing huge amounts of crime at the expense of ethnic Europeans. And, I mean, why be afraid of Russia when your country is already on the path to ruin?
when they actually when the Nord 2 pipeline, gas pipeline, was blown up, what that basically meant was the conflict that was happening in Ukraine could only end in warfare, not diplomacy. It had to be war at that point. And who did that? It was, according to the people I talked to, it was the United States in conjunction with someone else, possibly Sweden, possibly the British Isles. Trying to blame the Ukrainians was laughable.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. All the covert stuff, they just put a Ukrainian label under it. That's Ukraine war is so great for intelligence agencies in the West. Pack a bunch of shipping containers full of drones, ship them to Russia, have the drones fly out and attack strategic bombers that are out on the tarmac. Then just blame Ukraine. It was Ukraine who did it. Everything was set up by like MI6 and Western intelligence, but the Ukraine war is going on, so anything done against Russia can be blamed on the Ukrainians.
Right. But what that meant was that's a German piece of infrastructure. That was an ally, an ally that and Europe's lost its energy source.
Yep.
While Europe was convinced.
And Germany is in rapid deindustrialization as a result of that. I used to think that Germany would be the best country off once the dollar collapsed, because it had a manufacturing sector. It could still make things. But now, in just a few years, this Ukraine war, that's gone. Germany is going to be just as, let's say, put it lightly, fucked as the rest of Europe when the dollar collapses, because they've rapidly deindustrialized themselves.
Convinced to put sanctions against Russia, who had supplied most of their energy. The Inflation Reduction Act was being developed in America to encourage companies to leave Europe and go to America. Thanks, guys. Right. So the war in Ukraine, the way it's presented to us in very simplistic terms, but recently the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, declassified some information just before she left. The United States government, military, but also the government as well, has been actively supporting and funding directly 120 bioweapon labs around the world, most of which are actually producing things that are actually against the Geneva Convention. Illegal stuff. Not kosher. Not possible. 40 of them happen to be in Ukraine. One of them is right up against the Russian border. So, what would the American response be if China had bioweapon labs in Mexico producing stuff, weapons of biological mass weapons of destruction in breach of the Geneva Convention right on the American border?
Yes, but that's not a perfect example. You have to do a China, let's say in this example, a China that has for like 2-3 decades just spewed out rabidly anti-American propaganda so that everyone in China hates America and believes Americans deserve to die. Then that China opens a bioweapon lab on Mexico, on the America's border in Mexico. Like the biolab of a country that absolutely loathes America and believes they should all die opens a bioweapon lab right next to our border. That is the perfect analogy, because it's far more terrifying when the country opening these weapon labs is rabidly anti-Russian in this real world. Yeah, of course that would terrify the Russians.
What would the American response be? Right, and what was interesting to me was when the Russians did invade, the first place they sent their special forces was, I believe, was Chernobyl. Which now, of course, that's speculation.
Yes, they captured that bioweapon lab that was right across the border. They remember them talking about it at the time. And actually, back in congressional testimony, at the time of the invasion started, there was acknowledgments under oath that these weapons labs in Ukraine existed. Of course, the media completely ignored it, just like they're ignoring the story now.
But to me, was some muppet trying to make a dirty bomb off the radioactive material that's under that busted nuclear reactor? Are they that stupid? Possibly. Right. What's going on? Now, this to me is Russia's part of the BRICS alliance. Russia is military. That's all they've got really to contribute. China is industrial and economic. They are part of all this, but they're...
No, Russia has the most resource-rich country in the world. It not only has military, it also has manufacturing. It's outproducing the entire NATO alliance in terms of artillery shell. It has manufacturing. It's just China has 100 times that manufacturing. But Russia is no slouch in manufacturing too.
Warfare has been economic, whereas Russia has been kinetic military. They're the two primary players of the BRICS alliance at the moment. I believe what's actually happening at before was it was the understanding for some time that the Western fiat currency-based system was going to reach a point of saturation, thus destruction, and something else had to happen in its place.
Yeah, I fully believe that China and Russia, Putin knows that dollar is on its last legs, and they're preparing for the world after the dollar. That is what the BRICS is. And that's, I think, one reason Putin hasn't escalated and struck Europe, despite all the drone attacks into Russia, is because he knows that that system is going to collapse. He knows that the globalists that are enabling those strikes are going to be held to account by their people when the collapse happens. And so why risk a wider war? I'm still of the opinion that if the provocation and escalation continues by Europe, Russia might be forced to hit back at NATO. But he's trying to avoid that as long as he can. Putin is.
BRICS nations were formed in the first place to get out from under that administration and get there. It's not unlike the American colonies telling the British Empire, "Get lost, we're tired of you exploiting us." It's actually the same dialogue. Because the way the SWIFT system's been operated, when the Russians were kicked out of SWIFT, it's now an economic weapon. We've got to get out from under that. But if they do that, then the debt saturation that is in that fiat system will mean there'll be a flight of capital from the west to the east.
Yes.
When I was in Hong Kong presenting to a conference, there were a lot of Chinese PRC officials there. I spoke to a governor of one of the provinces.
More wealth would have already gone to China if not for all of China's capital controls. It's not easy for the average person like you or me to open a renminbi account in China and put money there, unfortunately.
It's always interesting to talk to such people, even though it can be uncomfortable. This guy gave me such a dressing down. He was laughing his ass off at me. I go, ooh. But I listened to what he said. And what he was saying is the West is doing everything it can to destroy itself. And while it's on fire, the East will not lift a finger. And what he actually said was everything East is about to divorce everything West. So much so that they've been planning for it for years, decades. So, they needed...
Planning for this for 40 years, that's being, I think, a little too generous. 20 years is more on the timeline, maybe 25 years. When we started outsourcing our prosperity to China, during that time is when the planning for the post-US world started.
So for the West to win, they needed a big distraction like a war that has the way of cleaning the board and resetting things in terms that is suitable for that particular faction. They needed a war. They've been trying to start a war. The people who influence the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, all of these. It's like a big Western...
I disagree. It's not that they need a war. They need a victory. They need to take Russia out, to balkanize Russia, and to start exploiting it like they've done everywhere else that they balkanized. If they looted Russia of it, it broke apart the country, then looted all its natural resources, that could keep the whole U.S. Ponzi scheme going a decade. So that's why they're so desperate with the Ukraine war. And that's why Iran, the same deal to a lesser extent. If U.S. got control of Iran's oil, that might keep things going 2 or 3 or 4 more years. But Russia's the big prize. I mean, of course, they do it to China too, but it's just impossible. It's too integrated into the United States. It wouldn't be as easy to balkanize and exploit as Russia and Iran. So it's the biggest threat to the dollar. They can't go after it. They have to go after lesser threats first. But they're not going to succeed. And the fact that this Iran war happened, it weakens the whole Ukraine venture and ensures that both will fail.
Alliance, Europe at large, they have been starting wars and trying to start wars for 20, 30 years. They've been trying to bomb Iran since 2003. Right?
I disagree. Syria was the project. It started in 2011. That's what Mossad CIA was devoted to, taking out the Assad regime. Finally succeeded December 2024. Then less than 6 months later, Israel bombs Iran. It was Iran's turn. Until Syria was taken out, it wasn't Iran's turn. And they weren't seriously trying to bomb Iran. There wasn't a real push in the United States or Israel to deal with Iran, because starting an all-out war with Iran when you have a hostile Assad regime right on Israel's border, not maybe a great idea. Iran might start supplying weapons to the Assad regime, propping up the Assad regime as revenge for the war. Yeah, it would cause all types of chaos. So they needed to take Assad out first.
They've been trying to manufacture a war, and that war has to be large. So when Israel and the United States launched a preemptive attack that was completely unprovoked, that took out the Iranian leadership, at that point, the Iranians had no choice but to go to war. What, do you think there's any trust, or there's any possibility of, can we talk about this? Who? They're dead. What that means is the Iranians will then target all the oil stuff in the region. The world is now on fire. We can now spiral into a third world war with the right stage management. That's what they've been trying to do. So, in Ukraine, I'm of the opinion they did a whole series of things to try and provoke Russia. Why Ukraine? About a third of the gas that supplies Europe goes through Ukraine. They put a whole lot of stuff there that is like these illegal bioweapons. You got to be kidding me, right? Okay, but that wasn't allowed to come out until later. Then they did the
first few weeks of the war, it did come out. There was testimony in Congress about the bioweapon labs, confirmed. There was like an article on Zero Hedge about it. But just because it comes out doesn't mean anything, because if the media doesn't spread awareness, cover the story, the congressional testimony goes nowhere. No one knows about it if there's no media coverage.
2014 Maidan coup. That was a color revolution organized.
Zero Hedge readers like me know about it, but no one else.
The CIA, they've admitted as much. That's not a theory. That's a Senate briefing. Right, but then they did a whole lot of things to antagonize the Russians by getting West Ukrainians to target the civilian population of the Ukrainian Russians. And so Russia domestically had no choice but to respond somehow. And when they did, it was right. So they're trying to organize a large-scale kinetic shooting war. Ukraine's the most corrupt country in the world, or one of them.
It is.
It's not part of Europe. It's not part of NATO. Yet Europe has been convinced to take actions that involves its own economic destruction and possible physical destruction on behalf of this country. Why? In a way,
it's insane.
Where there is no choice. Because
there's no democracy in Europe. The vast majority of Europe's population is against mass migration, yet it's happening anyway. Vast part of Europe doesn't want war with Russia, yet the leaders are provoking it in every way they can. There is no democracy in Europe.
No discussion. There is no nuance. There is no wriggle room. We must go to war. There are no exceptions. I think we've been punked by the Russians, because they set up a defensive line, and then the West then sends everything it's got against that line, and it all gets destroyed. The Russians are taking heavy casualties, sure, but what's also happening is NATO, all consumable weapons have been destroyed.
Yep.
And then they keep having to send more. Anything they can put in a shipping container, they send to Ukraine. And the West doesn't have the money to replace these things. And that's evidence
exactly.
of when the Iran war kicked off, they ran out of missiles and they had to take Patriot systems from Poland to do it. Right. And so they're trying to stage manage a war, and I think the Russians' plan is to try and stay out of a war while the West collapses under its own weight economically.
That is definitely, absolutely definitely Putin's plan. The problem is these drone strikes. If they intensify, I don't know if Russia can afford to not retaliate. But on the plus side, China is restricting its export of drone parts, which might be a way to reduce the drone attacks against Russia without Russia directly attacking the factories in Europe making the drones. So those factories in Europe can't get drone parts anymore. It achieves the same effect as if Russia bombs them. So that at least now it's a little bit less likely that Russia attacks Europe. But there's still risk, depending on what provocations happened on the part of Europe.
And that's why things have been dragging out so long. And the longer we go further into debt, the longer with debt saturation, the closer to things cracking and breaking domestically. And we're seeing those cracks.
Yes.
And I believe we've been in an unconventional fifth generation multi-dimensional conflict for about 20, 30 years. And we just haven't realized it. Or at least the civilian population hasn't realized it.
No, it's 80 years since basically, well, I'd say the conspiracy to prop up the dollar part of it really began around 1960. So 60 years. The conspiracy predates that. The MK Ultra stuff that happened, the Exchange Stabilization Fund was set up in 1934. During the period from 1934 to 1960, that was just the spooks, the CIA just wasting money left and right on stuff like MK Ultra, rigging elections in Italy, etc., flooding the world with dollars as they were high on themselves. They were fighting communism and just spending away U.S. prosperity because these guys weren't economics or bankers. They didn't understand what it meant to just print dollars and just flood the world with them. What consequences could there be? Then suddenly the rest of the world started seeing how many dollars were floating around. They realized, hey, these dollars are backed by gold in the United States, but if we count out all the dollars in Europe and the rest of the place, there's more dollars here than the United States has gold to make good on them. Oh, we should trade them in. Not everyone will be able to get gold if we start trading them in, so we should trade ours in first. And started the rush to redeem dollars for gold. That started around 1960, and that's where we got into the Ponzi scheme conspiracy time from about 1960 to today. The propping up the United States dollar and doing all types of horrible shit like outsourcing our manufacturing just to lower inflation a little bit. Yeah, throwing away a long-term prosperity just to bring inflation a little bit more under control. Isn't that idiotic?
Yeah, and so I'm watching all this happen going, yeah, gosh, why Ukraine? Gas. That's where the gas is going. Because, okay, the Russians invade.
Yeah, look at the chart of what happened in 1971 again. Yes, the 1971 is when U.S. broke the gold standard, took the dollar completely off the gold standard. Even if you had dollars, you couldn't redeem that in gold anymore. And yes, everything went to shit after that, if you look at charts from 1971. But the 11 years before that, there was something like the London Gold Pool. Run by the Exchange Stabilization Fund. Coalition was a 1961 coalition of 8 Western central banks led by the United States and managed by the Bank of England. And when it says led by the United States, that's the Exchange Stabilization Fund. That deals, it's in charge of defending the dollar's value. Anything international, that's the Exchange Stabilization Fund. And so that started in 1961. So that's why I say the Ponzi scheme, this propping up the dollar part of this conspiracy, started like 1960, 1961.
Invade Ukraine. What do? We've got no imagination. We hit them with sanctions. Of course we're going to hit them with sanctions. That's actually an act of war. That's an economic act of war, as aka what the United States did to Japan in the precursor to World War II. Straight after the sanctions, the Russians said, "Oh, well, the agreement's over, right? So we're not going to accept payment for oil as agreed in euros or dollars. You're now going to pay rubles."
That is something Russia did do.
And the British banking system goes, "That's unacceptable, because if they do that, then the commodities dollar idea suddenly goes live. It's a vector for it." The ruble was restructured. It wasn't a true fiat currency anymore, and it was partially backed by commodities, as per the Basel III Banking Accord, which was ratified around then. And so then the Russians would say, turn around and say, right, well, either you pay for the gas, or we're not going to send it to you. So no gas came into Europe, not because the Russians wouldn't give it to us, it's because we wouldn't pay for it.
That did happen.
Right. So is it the case of the Russians cut the gas off, and or was it, hang on, we wouldn't pay for it after we broke the arrangement that we had in contract? While we're doing stuff that's in breach of the Geneva Convention in a country right up against their border. None of this was allowed to come out. There are no good guys on the board. They're all like the
I
Russian.
read about all this in Zero Hedge. It depends on your media source. Zero Hedge, one of the best alternative media sources. It covers all this stuff.
Are clearly unethical bastards, but are we any better? Probably not. Right? It's power. It's the dynamics of power and people being people. Monkey business at the senior levels or policy levels of power. They don't care. They're completely decoupled from the consequences on the ground. And so this is the stuff of empires being destroyed and empires being built. And that's what I believe the Ukraine war is about, and that's what I believe the Iran war is about. So Iran, I don't believe what we've been presented is the true story. Basic math shows that the United States is never going to survive militarily in that environment for very long.
I think the Iran war is the part of the system breaking down. The deep state did not want this war. It's all in on the Ukraine war. And the Iran war undermines it in all types of ways, like I've said several times already. So trying to read into it too deeply, it's a Trump, an outsider of the system, that's now only influenced by one arm of the deep state, the Zionist arm from Israel. Also, Trump that's propagandized by Fox News 3 hours a day, thinking that the U.S. military is undefeatable. And so what is the risk of attacking Iran? It's not like the United States would lose. That's in the back of Trump's mind. He wasn't really afraid of attacking Iran because, of course, the United States is undefeatable. So those two things, Netanyahu, bad intel, and his huge influence over Trump, combined with Trump's lack of understanding of the world as a result of his huge consumption of Western propaganda, gave us this wonderful Iran war.
I don't think they're going in there to win as such. I think they went in there to destroy. And they must be taking heavy casualties. We don't know what they are, but they must be huge. In exchange for those heavy casualties, what do the Americans achieve? I mean, anyone with half a brain, let alone the professional military strategists in the Pentagon, would be able to predict exactly what happened. Yet they went and did it anyway, and they keep doing it, and they're doubling down and tripling down. Are they stupid?
That is not the doubling down on it. That's completely understandable. Once Trump has bombed the supreme leader, politically, he can't afford to lose. He can't afford to surrender to Iran, and that's the only way to end the war is to surrender to Iran. The only way to reopen the Straits of Hormuz. And so he's throwing a tantrum on them. He just keeps bombing them. He keeps asking them, surrender to me, surrender to me. You won't surrender to me? I'll bomb you some more. And then Iran strikes back, destroys more U.S. bases. And then Trump goes back, to manipulate the oil markets because he's afraid of high oil prices. He's constantly saying, we nearly have a deal. But because there's no actual negotiating going on, no deal in sight, he bombs them again. And that's where we are, just this another pause between the bombing because before the next Trump tantrum where he tries to strike them a few more times, hoping that maybe they'll save his ass politically. It won't happen. Trump is going down because of this Iran war, and there's nothing that can prevent that. And yeah, he did it to himself.
Stupid? I don't think so. I believe what will come out later is some information about the Iran war that'll put things in a...
It's funny. The deep state has tried to take down Trump in so many ways, so many times. During first term, Russian hoax. Then of course, it's the 2020 election when the underhanded stuff that happened then. There was going after him legally in New York, the criminal case, trying to confiscate all his assets. Then there was the bullet shot at him in Butler, and I guarantee you that was in Iran. And despite all that, they failed to take Trump down. And the one who actually takes Trump down is Trump himself and Netanyahu with his stupid Iran war. Trump destroys himself. You might not see it yet, to understand, but this Iran war is going to completely ruin Trump's presidency. The political damage from it hasn't even begun to hit. Once the oil crisis starts, gas prices explode much higher than they are right now, and the United States is forced to surrender to Iran. American people realize that they're paying high gas prices because of a war the United States lost, that now Iran's going to have a nuclear weapon. They have control of Strait of Hormuz. Our bases in the region are destroyed, and all we have to show for it is like a severe recession. political damage from that. It's not survivable for Trump.
An entirely new context, aka what happened in Ukraine with the bioweapon labs that came out. Different information that changes the calculus on everything. I think what it's about is something else entirely different, and it could be that the Iranians are not actually the target at all. It's actually going to be something else. For example, the Chinese economy. China needs the oil.
Okay, there's one reason it's not a grand plan, this Iran invasion, is because it wasn't predictable. It was based on Trump, which is mercurial, that one day says he won't do something, he will do something. This is a Trump that has said no new wars in the Middle East for half the time he was president. The odds of him starting a war against Iran, it's not something the deep state could make happen with a 100% certainty. It's some point, like Netanyahu can try to push Trump towards the war, but there's no guarantee it would actually happen. So you can't make any long-term plans on an event that's low probability, that is not certain to happen at all. It's not possible.
Ouch.
Yeah, I've heard that theory from a few people as well, that China is actually the real target here. A lot going on behind the scenes. I want to end by perhaps finding some light at the end of the tunnel if we can. Do you think there is a silver lining here? Will this reset coming, whether it's initially pushed by the political elite, the power brokers, and perhaps that will be, their goal could be this prison planet situation. Perhaps that will come to pass to some extent. Could it fail? At the end of the day, do you think there will be a forced reset and we see a return perhaps to more freedom overall for humanity? Or are things just looking extremely bleak up ahead?
So I believe...
Just look at Russia today. It's doing really well. So follow Soviet Union, devastating for a while. Then things got better. The same thing will happen in the West. There will be a bad time, and then good times will come again eventually. All the rot will be cleansed out by those bad times.
if people also innovate in the face of adversity and they have the capacity to surprise. I think what's happening is people all over the planet are being red-pilled at a phenomenal...
China needs global consumers more than it needs oil. That's the problem that the U.S. experienced during the Great Depression is Germany, it's one of its biggest customers, experienced hyperinflation, couldn't buy any of U.S.'s shit anymore. That's how we had deflation. That's what's going to happen in China, too. When the dollar collapses, the demand from the United States will collapse, too, because the currency is collapsing. No one has any money to buy anything. And so there will be deflationary time in China. Hopefully they can prepare for it and encourage domestic consumption to replace the United States, because that is the solution. That saved the United States from the Great Depression is World War II, demand from that, and also ultimately domestic consumption. So, and I'm sure that will happen, because once the dollar collapses, the Chinese renminbi will be forced higher. Chinese citizens will have higher purchasing power. Consumer goods in China will fall in price, and that will encourage domestic consumption.
rate. They're finally understanding. They're understanding a couple of things. That the system that they've lived under for the last 50, 60 years is fraud and it's criminal. Right. What I believe will happen is a parallel...
Yes, a lot of Americans aren't going to like the result of what happens over the next 5-10 years, especially the boomers, but they are the ones, ultimately. It's the boomer generation that, a specific group of boomers that fucked everything over for the West. And it's their fault on some level for not seeing through the propaganda and just letting the corrupt cabal wreck everything in the West.
Parallel system will be developed in a series of small scales that will then grow in complexity over time. And it will have its foundations of a new form of energy, a new form of money, a new form of manufacture. And
Though I really do feel sympathetic to the average boomer that they had no real way to do anything about anything. And why would they doubt the mainstream media is lying to them about everything? And literally, anyone listening to this, you don't know how much the mainstream media lies. You might even, if you know a few of those lies, it's far more than you think. Nearly every conflict in the world is spun to be unrecognizable from the truth, like the Ukraine war.
new form of sourcing of resources. And this will sort of develop at a small decentralized scale that can't be easily controlled, right? And it will develop over time. And as the larger system starts to break apart, a new system will take hold. And because not everyone's going to go along with this, it's not going to be for everyone as such, but some of us.
My one fear, and what I really hope doesn't happen, is that the equivalent of the Exchange Stabilization Fund takes root in China. And China goes down the exact same route as the United States. You have the equivalent, corrupt group in China that starts rigging everything to prop up the renminbi. Well, first there'll be the good years, like United States from 1934 to 1960, where we were a reserve currency, started spending all our money everywhere and basically wrecking dollar. If China does that, and then it gets into the same conspiracy spiral that the United States got into, I really hope that doesn't happen.
I think, are going to see what's happening. And that could be the long-range way that we fix the conundrum that we're in. Because I've often wondered, how the hell do we fix this nasty situation that we found ourselves in? Like, I first saw this 20 years ago, and I remember sort of thinking, how on earth are we going to get out of this? I don't know. But now I do. Okay, energy system. I'm currently researching thorium molten salt reactors. They're about to commercialize. Southeast Asia will lead the way. Hyundai and Samsung are probably going to be the operators that actually bring this out. A new currency is coming in. I think there's going to be all kinds of it. I think it will be a cryptocurrency, but it'll be backed by some sort of physical asset like gold and silver. What form this takes, I don't know. But people are starting to get very wise of the fraud that's actually being perpetuated on them at the moment. The big difficulty is, where do we get our food from? And how do we produce it? Because at the moment, we think everything comes from the supermarket and everything's fine.
That won't be a problem, at least in the short term, because when there's a food shortage, it's the poor who starve. And the United States dollar has too much purchasing power. It's not... Maybe the very, 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 very poorest Americans will go a little bit hungry. But mostly it's the rest of the world, specifically like Africa, that's going to be doing the starving.
So am I hopeful? Yes, I am, with the understanding that society's got to go through an unprecedented period of difficulty first. Are we doomed? No. The system we were bred to serve is doomed.
The system is doomed. Yep. Ponzi scheme.
That's probably how I would say that.
Yeah, excellent. Simon, fantastic conversation. You've shed light on so much. I think I'll have to have you back on again because there's so many rabbit holes I'd love to dive down with you. Where can people go online who want to follow your work?
Okay, simonmichaud.com is where I put my professional publications. I can send you these.
Well, this was a great video. Long, but very interesting. And I agree with a lot. Some parts I don't completely agree with. I added my context there. But yes, we're heading towards a great reset, but not the great reset the globalists want. A different type of great resets where, let's say, globalists in Europe and the US, they don't have a future in that great reset. And it's going to be a very rough ride. Anyway, this will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.